Hey boys and girls, today we are going to read our last story in this reading book. And this book is the last book in our first grade reading series. This story is called The Stone Garden. It's realistic fiction, which means it's a made-up story. The author made it up. It didn't really happen. But it could really happen. There's nothing in it completely crazy and outrageous that would make it a fantasy story. And I'm on page 210 in my reading book. And there it talks about the genre, which is a fancy word for type. And it says realistic fiction takes place in a setting that seems real. This story takes place in a yard in a big city. Our question of the week is, what can happen when someone has a new idea? And I have that question right here. I want to leave it there so that we can remember to think about it as we read through our weekly story. Okay. Momoko sat on the steps of her new home. "This yard needs a garden," she told her dog, Pochi. The yard was bordered on all sides with homes like hers. Except for 3 old tires and a few empty crates, it was as cold and bare as the moon. The caretaker walked by. "Hello, Momo girl," he said. "Mr. B, is that your land?" "That is no man's land," Mr. B said, "because no man has the time to do a thing with it." "May I do something with it?" Momoko asked. Mr. B shrugged. "Why not? As long as it does not make more work for me." The first thing this poor, unwanted yard needed was a cleaning, Momoko decided. So she picked up every bit of litter. She swept and re-swept the ground clear. Then she and Pochi made a game of piling the tires in one corner and taking the crates to another. Next, she filled her pockets with all the stones they could carry. Now she was ready to plant. She used an old spoon her mother gave her to dig a furrow. Into the furrow went the stones, plop, plop, plop. So there's a word that's a little strange, a furrow. And that's not one that I might have heard before, but as a good reader, I can use the clues around me to figure out words that I may not know. So since she dug it and puts the stones inside it, I'm thinking it's another word for a small hole for planting. Right? So she gently covered the stones with earth and watered them with a coffee can. Then she sat down and wished and waited. So she is planting rocks, stones. I wonder if they'll grow a stone tree. I don't think so. By now, everyone in the complex was watching her. From behind their curtains, some called her, "That silly girl." But they were curious. One by one, they came outside. "I've planted a stone garden," Momoko answered anyone who asked. "A stone garden? Ha!" said one man. Momoko smiled and kept working. The man returned a while later. "Here," he said gruffly, and handed her a potted yellow pansy. Momoko thanked him. She replanted the pansy in the ground, and they both stood back to admire it. Later, a young woman stopped by and asked Momoko what she was doing. "I've planted a stone garden," she said. The young woman laughed, but as Momoko continued to weed and water, she too went away and returned with a gift. "They're tulips," she explained, as she offered a bag of bulbs. Momoko thanked her and planted the bulbs all over the yard. One morning, Momoko found that someone had buried the 3 unused tires along one side of the yard. Inside each tire was a tiny rose bush. The next day, she found 2 empty crates refilled with dirt. One crate held several young tomato plants. The other had 2 markers in it, One said carrots, the other said peas. And so it went. Every day something was different. Mr. Bee lent Momoko a hose. A pair of little apple trees appeared. One day a neighbor left a butterfly bush with red blossoms. A basket of herbs showed up beside the vegetable crates with a small stone lion to protect it. So there it is right there. As the stone garden grew, Momoko met more and more of her neighbors. Chairs popped up like mushrooms outside people's front doors. In the evenings, people would sit and visit. Some would help Momoko take care of the garden. Momoko loved the trees and shrubs and flowers, but she was most excited about the vegetables. She almost burst with happiness when one mild morning it happened. A tender sprout unwound itself and poked its head out of the soft dirt. "Oh!" Momoko cried. She ran to share the news. Everyone came out to see this small miracle. "Who would have believed it?" said Mr. Bee. "Who would have believed you could grow such a garden here?" Momoko knelt down to gaze at all the living green things. Who would have believed what you could grow from a pocket full of stones? The end. So her stones did not grow, but what she was doing gave all the neighbors the idea. She came up with the idea, and they all wanted to help. And then it just kept growing, and now people are sitting, and they're meeting each other, and they're all gathering at this garden that all started with a little girl who was planting some stones, right? So her new idea that she had, it spread, and everybody added a piece of it, and now they have this beautiful area where all the neighbors can come together and enjoy it. I really like that story. It really shows how much things can change, or what happens when someone has a new idea, right? I'm sure you guys have some great ideas too that maybe once you start doing them can turn into even bigger and better plans and ideas. I hope you enjoyed the story.